Hi there. Over the centuries, people have claimed to receive messages about spiritual matters from a spiritual source or from the spiritual source. And there is, I think, a difference between saying the spiritual source and saying a spiritual source. We'll come back to that if we have time. Um, Yeah. But this is a practical guide to the idea of receiving messages from on high or from within. Uh, it's a guide which is necessary because I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, same as there is on the internet, and same as you might argue from this channel. Okay. If you're feeling really mean. But maybe you've got a point there, because what is information anyway? What is misinformation, therefore? Information in the lower worlds, is it all just misinformation? I don't know if it is. That's a bit of a grim kind of conclusion to come to. I think that, we have to live in hope, really, that some information is bona fide and useful. And of course, the original sign for Cairo, which is the anointed Jesus, actually was stood as an old pagan sign, which used to put in the margin of manuscripts that had been proofread, and it meant this paragraph had been proofread. In other words, it was a sign of authenticity and a sign of something having passed the test, as it were, of the proofreader. So there's no grammatical errors and there's no spelling mistakes. So it's more or less a sort of a kind of trademark of good quality, I suppose, usefulness, and anything which is of good quality and is accurate and is to the point and doesn't have misinformation is more useful than things which are just a pack of lies. Ultimately, although lies can be fun in the right context, in a sort of entertainment context, anyway. But pretty useless if you intend to act on any of the information that you receive, which turns out to be complete balderdash, usually anyway. So good information is useful. And good information, I think, is very practical. It's rather ironic. We talk about spirituality being transcendent of the practical realms, of the realms of matter. And yet I think that the good and useful information, the perfect information, is something which tells you what you actually have to do as well. But I think information has to be graded. And so this is my little brief survey of what, over the years, I have discovered about the information that you receive from a spiritual source or from the spiritual source. I have to say to you, we'll look at a spiritual source. Information, insights, feelings, intuitions that you feel about, that you receive about the cares of this world, about worldly matters, actually originate from the same source that created this entire dualistic world. So in terms of usefulness, pretty useless, in fact. And probably misinformation to spread fear and panic, on which the demiurge and his agents feed. And this is a model which I keep on about. So basically, everything that you receive, the cares of this world, the world is as it is. Ultimately, the world is the lost cause. Pretty much your insights and feelings about this world are probably going to be wrong, unless they're actually founded on empiricism. Which is, if you have a theory, you have to prove that theory, and the theory has to coincide with the actual facts of nature. So it's the world as it is, rather than the world as you would like it to be, or the world that you think it is. Because the world as you think it is a world full of fear, actually. and fertility and futility, which breeds more fear and a world of frustration. And rather than empiricism, which establishes the facts of the matter, and science, which gives evidence to theories and backs theories up with proper evidence. And in this world, that's a really, really good idea. To rely more on empiricism rather than intuition as far as the cares of this world are concerned. Which, of course, is why the demiurge didn't want and hasn't wanted enlightenment. He hasn't wanted science to dominate the world, because science dispels fear and frustration. But superstition, which is the norm before science came along, fuels fear and frustration and a sense of futility. The demiurge isn't too pleased, really, with what has happened to the world after the Enlightenment. And it's a funny way of looking at it, because most people will tell you that, spirituality is sort of opposed to scientific method, opposed to the materialism of science. Actually, I don't think that's really true if you really think about it hard enough. Anyway, so pretty much all the things that you get about this world, information about this world, are false, come from a false source. Not always, though. I mean, there was Kekule who discovered something very important in chemistry as a result of having a dream. So sometimes, you can't generalize about these matters really at all. And this is only a brief survey anyway. You could find lots of examples, in fact, where, people have had dreams and visions and intuition which actually did help them discover science, ironically enough. So, of course, in the lower worlds, everything is contradiction and irony. And you say something about this world, and it's immediately contradicted by something else, which is what we sort of would expect, really. Now, the other grade of information is general stuff about yourself, about your relationship with the world. And usually, sometimes you get an intuition or a feeling that you should do something, or a feeling that you shouldn't do something. And sometimes you might get an odd word or two said to you, like try this, or walk away from this, or something, or lighten up, as a little bit of information I received recently. Lighten up, just 2 words. And then the words stop after that. So it's just general information of an advisory of general advice about your life. And usually it doesn't last very long, and you don't have to accept it, because after all, it is just advice, and you've got free will, and don't allow yourself to be dominated by spiritual advice, and go against the advice and see where that takes you. It might take you into areas of creativity and forced adaptation, which might be what, in fact, you need more than the advice. I mean, if you observe the advice, you might go into safety, but then again, you might not, learn from safety. You might have to learn from danger instead. But certainly, you get the odd bit of advice about where you should be going in life, and as I say, you don't have to take that advice just because it's spiritual, comes from a so-called spiritual source. And anyway, it still concerns duality. It still concerns your life, which is still in the world of dualism. And I think there are many so-called spiritual energies knocking around in this world, who are full of advice and give you intuitions and insights. But they all partake and pertain to the dualism of the world. So, you're not really getting anywhere. But the final, I suppose, the final order of information. Well, there's another one as well. Well, there's a third order of information, which has two categories to it. One are general feelings, a sense of spirituality, a numinous experience, they call it, a soul awareness. And this has nothing to do with this world, and it doesn't give you advice about this world, and it doesn't tell you to do something or not to do something. It's just a sense of quietude and alignment and oneness with the spiritual source. And this information was, is it information or more experience? I suppose there's a grey area between information and experience here. You have a sense of God, but is that information about God? I don't really know. Actually, it could be, couldn't it? I suppose, but the other category of information is insights into the corpus, into the teaching. Sometimes you may get an insight into a teaching which has already been written down, or sometimes you can have insights, create your own teaching on about spirituality, and you can come up with your own observations about spiritual matters. And these, I suppose, also somewhat not written in stone either, actually. And the thing about insights in revelations is that you have an insight revelation. You think, oh, I've got the answer, and then 5 minutes later you got another answer, which trumps the original answer, as it were. So, information about the teaching of Gnosticism is growing, is evolving. It's not something which is static. It's evolving. So you can't be dogmatic about anything that you receive in terms of insight into the actual Gnostic teachings. So you contribute your insights on YouTube or wherever. And that can be helpful to some people, and not helpful to other people. And that's okay. And you're just contributing to the great work, as it were, which is a collective work rather than an individual work of some kind of Grand Master or Magus or Ipsissimus or something like that. I would say that the highest grade of magic that you can get to in this world is Magesta Templari, which is basically just a teacher. But a teacher is always learning from their students, so that the line between teacher and student is very blurred when it comes to spiritual matters, which is as it should be. So I would say that of all these experiences, the grey day information is the experience of spirituality as experience. An individual insight into the teaching of Gnosticism, or even contributing to that body of knowledge. So that's the grade A. The grade B is information that you receive which observes your relationship with the universe, which is purely advisory, and which you can ignore because you have free will. And you can see where ignoring the advice will take you. It might take you into areas of more creativity than if you'd actually heeded the advice, which would only take you to an area of stasis or safety. But there is an argument, that we are here to learn and to have experiences, to learn from those experiences. So, stasis and safety and non-action can be detrimental to that process. And in any case, according to the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, if you do act and you dedicate the fruits of your actions to the spiritual source, is one way of changing action from non-righteous action into righteous action. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. And I think the source of those words could be the very source of this world. So finally we come to insights, thoughts, feelings, dreams, messages about the cares of this world. Some of them are very good, some of them are very necessary, and some of them are publishable. But really 95 or even 99% of stuff that you get about this world, it comes from the very source of our troubles. So, it's there usually to misinform and to make your sense of futility stronger, your fear stronger, and your frustration stronger, because it's a psychic energy which upon which the demiurge and his agents feed. Now, you could say to me, well, where did you get that information from? Did you get that information from grade C, B, or A? And I think that's a very moot point, and it's a very valid question, because a lot of things are written down in the Gospels of Gnosticism, and there's loads of spiritual texts are knocking around, including stuff that I have humbly produced, and other people have contributed in blogs and vlogs and all that. Are they C, B, or A? Are they coming from the divine transcendental source, or are they coming from some kind of source which is trying to explain your relationship with the universe, or they're coming from a source which is completely this worldly, and is commenting on this world in a misinformed way, or deliberately telling you stuff about this world which isn't true. And only really empiricism and the method of science can actually tell us what is true about this material world. And that's a difficult one to answer, because when I say statements like, the demiurge is feeding off our fears, where am I getting that information from? And this has always been a problem for people receiving mystical or psychic information from some kind of source. How trustworthy is that source of information? And I suppose I can say that probably I've had insights about the teaching of Gnosticism, which have included statements about the demiurge, which I've also gleaned from other sources of people that received information about Gnosticism. So I'm not just making it up. I am inspired by other people's revelations, other people's insights as a result of going into deep meditation, or having spontaneous but pure insights from the transcendental source. And the corpus is collective. The great work is a collective work. And we're all adding to the sum of knowledge about the transcendental realm, and about the true God, and about the Gnostic process. But I agree with you that one has to be very careful, because it could be that misinformation, really, really does. There's a facsimile. There's copies of good information knocking around. There are fraudulent sources of information, and the information that they give to people is also fraudulent. And it's very difficult to tell the authentic from the false. But Jesus said, "By their fruits shall ye know them." So basically, any spiritual insights, and this is the greatest irony of all, I think, any spiritual insights which lead people to lead more functional lives in the here and now and in this world, and lead more, and actually maintain and create functional relationships with others. Basically, that seems to be good information. That's useful information. That's information that has a practical value. But information also about the methods, the various methods by which you can obtain the experience of the divine, which is grade A knowledge, as I've explained. The methods too probably are grade A. You're not providing people with answers. You're merely providing people with a way of getting answers for themselves. And that possibly is definitely grade A. Whereas publishing the answers that you receive may or may not be useful to other people. And that's how you should always leave it. You should have the caveat, and say to people from the jump, this information may or may not be useful to you. And if you do act on this information, it's your own responsibility. It's not my responsibility. I didn't incite you to do something on the basis of the information I gave you. I just gave it to you, and you did whatever you thought you should or could do with it, you know. But if you have a method, if you have some, this is a method that I found for having a transcendental experience, then that's pretty good. But again, methods, suit some people and they don't suit other people. So, again, you can't say this is the method. You have to do this method. You have to follow this recipe. There's lots of different recipes for baking bread, for cooking food, and some of them work for some people and not for other people. Some of them have better results than others. Sometimes there are tricks and tips to cooking that you have to take on board. Otherwise, you'll never be really very good at cooking. And I think it's the same with spirituality. You have to you have to suck it and see, really. You have to try different things. And just as in Windows, there's different things, different ways of achieving the same thing in the way that operating systems and computers actually work. There's different ways of achieving the numinous experience and achieving a sense of oneness with the divine. And it depends on the individual which one of those methods actually works. So you have to go shopping, really, and you have to try out different things, and you have to be not afraid of change. And if one method it seems to be rather closed to you, you've got to go and look for another method. But at the same time, you've also got to give a good crack to the method. You've got to stick to one method for a fairly long time before you do change. So you've got to change, but you've got to be conservative mostly. But you've also got to be not afraid to be radical if being radical is called for. It's hard to get the balance right. But I'm kind of digressing a little bit. So I hope that this kind of tangled rambling discussion of mine, which is reflected in this strange doodle that I've now come up with, it is useful to you and you can take some stuff away from it. I suppose you can take information from any source really and act on it or not act on it. It's all part of the learning experience, which they say, which they say is part and parcel of our soul experience of the lower worlds. In other words, the schoolroom model. This the whole of existence in all dimensions is a schoolroom. We go to different classes and we have to learn different lessons. And we take that information with us, finally, when we sort of transcend the whole of matter and all the worlds of the demiurge and go back to the divine source, you see. And that's an interesting model, which I don't have time for to go into here, but it's very well documented anyway. Lots of people know about this classroom model, and it's worth actually doing a bit of research on, really. I think the best thing to do, really, especially if you're a beginner, is to look for the Class A, look for the numinous experience, look for the actual feeling of being one with the divine, rather than looking for information on a particular problem in the world or a particular problem in your life or a particular problem of some kind of Gnostic theology. Rather than look for problems to solve, just chill out and relax and go into yourself, go within, and that's possibly the best thing that you could probably do most of the time, especially if you're a beginner. But I think even if you've been doing spirituality, as it were, for many years, you should also go back to fundamentals from time to time and go back and treat yourself as if you were a complete freshman to all this, because that's a good idea to do, because you can get rather, like a like a duster. You can gather a lot of dust to give you over the years, and you can get a lot of weird ideas and weird information sort of bubbling around in your subconscious, and it all can burst out sometimes and make you slip on a banana skin, make you do stupid stuff and think stupid stuff. And the spiritual pride comes into it as well. So actually, the more you know in spirituality, sometimes the less you know. Sometimes you're more stupid than the person starting out on the spiritual path. Actually, I've known a lot of people who claim to have been on the spiritual path for many decades, and well, A, they don't know what that really means. I've claimed it myself, and I don't know what that means either, really. And B, it doesn't mean jack, actually, because because you're starting new, afresh every day, really. I mean, I do hatha yoga, and every time I do hatha yoga, it's different. Every time I do hatha yoga, it's like I've never done hatha yoga before on one level. And yet on another level, I've done hatha yoga for, 45 years. So I've had all the experience behind me. And yet every posture presents new challenges every day. That's what I'm saying. So you're kind of learning. You have experience on one hand, but that doesn't really count for very much in the here and now, actually. So anyway, I'm sorry, a bit of a ramble, and I'll leave you with these thoughts and wish you the best of luck on your spiritual path. Well, luck has nothing to do with it. Skill, skill, or spill, or just keep taking the pill.